1st of June, Festival of Kana. The house is waiting. It knows. When I sacrificed yesterday, the entrails were black. Everything is turned to night. Outside it is spring, but in the house there is a coldness, a pall of despair that covers everything. We are cursed. This is no longer a house, but a grave. The birds do not sing in the garden, and even the sun does not dare penetrate the windows. No one knows how to lift the curse. They have given in, and lie as if waiting for death. But I know, and the house knows. Only blood will save us now. Chapter 1. A light breeze runs through the long grass at the top of the hill. Close up, the land looks ordinary, just heather and coarse pasture, with the occasional white stone standing out like a signpost. But if you were to fly up above these unremarkable hills, you would be able to see circular raised banks and darker rectangles amongst the greens and browns. Sure signs that this land has been occupied many, many times before. Ruth Galloway, walking rather slowly up the hill, does not need the eagle's eye view to know that this is an archaeological site of some importance. Colleagues from the university have been digging on this hill for days, and they have uncovered not only evidence of a Roman villa, but also of earlier Bronze Age and Iron Age settlements. Ruth had planned to visit the site earlier, but she's been busy marking papers and preparing for the end of term. It is May, and the air is sweet, full of pollen and the scent of rain. She stops, getting her breath back, and enjoying the feeling of being outdoors on a spring afternoon. The year has been dark so far, though not without unexpected bonuses, and she relishes the chance just to stand still, letting the sun beat down on her face. "Ruth!" She turns and sees a man walking towards her. He's wearing jeans and a work-stained shirt, and he treats the hill with disdain, hardly altering his long stride. He is tall and slim, with curly dark hair greying at the temples. Ruth recognizes him, as he obviously does her, from a talk he gave at her university several months ago. Dr. Max Gray, from the University of Sussex, an archaeologist and an expert on Roman Britain. "I'm glad you could come," he says, and he actually does look glad. A change from most archaeologists, who resent another expert on their patch. And Ruth is an acknowledged expert on bones, decomposition, and death. She is head of forensic archaeology at the University of North Norfolk. "Are you down to the foundations?" asks Ruth, following Max to the summit of the hill. It is colder here, and somewhere high above a skylark sings. "Yes, I think so," says Max, pointing to a neat trench in front of them. Halfway down, a line of grey stone can be seen. "I think we may have found something that will interest you, actually." Ruth knows without being told. "Bones," she says. Detective Chief Inspector Harry Nelson is shouting, despite a notoriously short fuse at work. At home with his wife and daughters he is a pussycat. He is not normally a shouter. Brusque commands are more his line, usually delivered on the run whilst moving on to the next job. He is a man of quick decisions and limited patience. He likes doing things, catching criminals, interrogating suspects, driving too fast and eating too much. He does not like meetings, pointless discussions, or listening to advice. Above all, he does not like sitting in his office on a fine spring day trying to persuade his new computer to communicate with him. Hence the shouting. "Leah!" he bellows. Leah, Nelson's admin assistant, or secretary as he likes to call her, edges cautiously into the room. She is a delicate, dark girl of 25, much admired by the younger officers. Nelson, though, sees her mainly as a source of coffee and an interpreter of new technology, which seems to get newer and more temperamental every day.
"Leah," he complains, "the screen's gone blank again."
"Did you switch it off?" asks Leah. Nelson has been known to pull out plugs in moments of frustration, once fusing all the lights on the second floor.
"No, well, once or twice."
Leah dives beneath the desk to check the connections. "Seems okay," she says. "Press a key."
"Which one?"
"Surprise me." Nelson thumps the spacebar and the computer miraculously comes to life, saying smugly, "Good afternoon, DCI Nelson."
"Fuck off,"
responds Nelson, reaching for the mouse.
"I beg your pardon?"
Leah's eyebrows rise.
"Not you," says Nelson. "This thing. When I want small talk, I'll ask for it."
"I assume it's programmed to say good morning," says Leah equably. "Mine plays me a tune."
Jesus wept.
Chief Superintendent Whitcliffe says everyone's got to familiarise themselves with the new computers. There's a training session at 4 today.
"I'm busy," says Nelson, without looking up. "Got a case conference out Swaffham way."
"Isn't that where they're doing that Roman dig?" asks Leah. "I saw it on Time Team." She has her back to Nelson, straightening files on his shelves, and so fails to see the sudden expression of interest on his face.
"A dig? Archaeology?"
"Yes," says Leah, turning round. "They've found a whole Roman town there, they think." Nelson now bends his head to his computer screen.
"Lots of archaeologists there, are there?"
"Yes. My uncle owns the local pub, the Phoenix, and he says they're in there every night. He's had to double his cider order."
"Typical,"
grunts Nelson. He can just imagine archaeologists drinking cider when everyone knows that bitter's a man's drink. Women archaeologists, though, are another matter.
"I might have a look at the site on my way back," he says.
"Are you interested in history?" asks Leah disbelievingly.
"Me? Yes. Fascinated. Never miss an episode of Sharp."
"You should be on our pub quiz team, then."
"I get too nervous,"
says Nelson blandly, typing in his password with one finger. Nelson 1. He's not one for ambiguity.
"Do me a favour, love. Make us a cup of coffee, would you?"
Swaffham is a picturesque market town, the kind Nelson drives through every day without noticing. A few miles outside, and you are deep in the country. Fields waist-high with grass. Signposts pointing in both directions at once. Cows wandering across the road, shepherded by a vacant-looking boy on a quad bike. Nelson is lost in seconds, and almost gives up before it occurs to him to ask the vacant youth the way to the Phoenix pub. When in doubt in Norfolk, ask the way to a pub. It turns out to be quite near, so Nelson does a U-turn in the mud, turns into a road that is no more than a track. And there it is. A low, thatched building facing a high, grassy bank. Nelson parks in the pub car park, and, with a heart turn that he does not want to acknowledge as excitement, he recognises the battered red Renault parked across the road, at the foot of the hill.
"I just haven't seen her for a while," he tells himself. "It'll be good to catch up."
He has no idea where to find the dig, or even what it will look like, but he reckons he'll be able to see more from the top of the bank. It's a beautiful evening. The shadows are long on the grass, and the air is soft. But Nelson does not notice his surroundings. He is thinking of a bleak coastline, of bodies washed out to sea by a relentless tide, of the circumstances in which he met Ruth Galloway. She had been the forensic archaeologist called in when human bones were found on the salt marsh, a desolate spot on the North Norfolk coast. Though those bones had turned out to be over 2,000 years old, Ruth had subsequently become involved in a much more recent case, that of a 5-year-old girl, abducted, believed murdered. He hasn't seen Ruth since the case ended 3 months ago. At the top of the hill, all he can see is more hills. The only features of interest are some earthworks in the distance, and 2 figures walking along the top of a curving bank. One, a brown-haired woman in loose, dark clothes. The other, a tall man in mud-stained jeans. A cider drinker, he'll be bound.
"Ruth!"
calls Nelson. He can see her smile. She has a remarkably lovely smile. Not that he would ever tell her so.
"Nelson!"
She looks good too, he thinks. Her eyes bright, her cheeks pink with exercise. She hasn't lost any weight, though, and he realizes that he would have been rather disappointed if she had. "What are you doing here?" asks Ruth. They don't kiss or even shake hands, but both are grinning broadly.
"Had a case conference nearby. Heard there was a dig here."
"What? Are you watching Time Team now?"
"My favourite viewing."
Ruth smiles sceptically and introduces her companion. "This is Dr. Max Gray from Sussex University. He's in charge of the dig. Max, this is DCI Nelson." The man, Max, looks up in surprise. Nelson himself is aware that his title sounds incongruous in the golden evening.
"Crime happens, even here," Nelson tells Max Gray silently.
Academics are never keen on the police. But Dr. Gray manages a smile.
"Are you interested in archaeology, DCI Nelson?"
"Sometimes," says Nelson cautiously.
"Ruth, Dr. Galloway, and I worked on a case together recently."
"That affair on the salt marsh?" asks Max, his eyes wide. "Yes," says Ruth shortly. DCI Nelson called me in when he found some bones on the marsh.
"Turned out to be bloody Stone Age,"
says Nelson. "Iron Age," corrects Ruth automatically. "Actually, Nelson, Max found some human bones today."
"Iron Age?"
asks Nelson. "Roman, we think. They seem to have been buried under the wall of a house. Come and see." She leads them down the bank and towards the earthworks. Close up, Nelson sees that the land is full of these strange mounds and hills, some curving round, some standing alone like large molehills.
"What are all these bumps?"
he asks Max Gray.
"We think they're walls,"
replies Max, his face lighting up in the way that archaeologists have when they are about to bore the pants off you. "You know, we think there was a whole settlement here. We're fairly near the old Roman road, but from the surface, the only signs are some brown lines in the grass. Crop marks, that sort of thing." Nelson looks back at the smoothly curving bank. He can just about imagine it as a wall, but the rest just looks like grass to him.
"This body, you say it's under a wall?"
"Yes. We just dug a trial trench and there it was. We think it's the wall of a villa. Quite a sizable one by the looks of it."
"Funny place to find bones, under a wall," says Nelson.
"They may have been a foundation sacrifice," says Max.
"What's that?"
"The Celts, and the Romans sometimes, used to bury bodies under walls and doors as offerings to the gods Janus and Terminus."
"Terminus?"
"The god of boundaries."
"I pray to him whenever I go to Heathrow. And the other one?"
"Janus, god of doors and openings."
"So, They killed people and stuck their bodies under their houses. Funny sort of look.
We don't know if they killed them or if they were dead already, says Max calmly. But the bodies are often children's.
Jesus.
They've reached the trench, which has been covered by a blue tarpaulin. Ruth peels back the covering and kneels on the edge of the trench. Nelson crouches beside her. He sees a neat, rectangular hole. He often wishes that his crime scene boys were as tidy as archaeologists. The edge is sharp and straight. The trench is about 1 metre deep, and Nelson can see a clear cross-section of the layers as the topsoil gives way to clay and then chalk. Below the chalk, a line of grey stones can be seen. Next to the stones, a deeper hole has been dug. At the bottom of this hole is a gleam of white.
"Haven't you dug them up?"
asks Nelson. "No," says Ruth. "We need to record and draw the grave and skeleton on plan so that we can understand its context. It'll be really important to check which way the skeleton is lying. Could be significant if it points to the east, for example."
"The brothers used to tell us to sleep with our feet to the east," says Nelson, suddenly remembering, "so that if we died in the night, we could walk to heaven."
"An interesting survival of superstition," says Ruth coolly. Nelson remembers that she has no time for religion. "Churches," Ruth goes on, "are nearly always built east to west, never north to south."
"I'll remember that. And sometimes," cuts in Max, "men are buried facing west and women facing east." "Sounds sexist to me," says Nelson, straightening up.
"And you're never sexist," says Ruth.
"Never. I've just been on a course all about redefining gender roles in the police force."
"What was it like?"
"Crap. I left at lunchtime."
Ruth laughs, and Max, who has been looking disapproving, smiles too, looking from Ruth to Nelson and back again. Clearly more is going on here than he realised. "We're just off to the Phoenix for a drink," Ruth is saying. "Do you want to come?"
"I can't," says Nelson regretfully. "I've got some sort of do to go to."
"A do?"
"A ball in aid of the festival. It's being held at the castle. Black tie and all that. Michelle wanted to go."
"How the other half lives," says Ruth. Nelson's only reply is a grunt. He can't think of anything worse than pouncing around in a monkey suit in the company of a load of arty-farty types. But not only his wife, but his boss, Jerry Whitcliffe, were insistent that he should go.
"Just the sort of PR the force needs,"
Whitcliffe had said, carefully not mentioning that it was Nelson's handling of the Saltmarsh case that had left the local force so in need of good publicity. PR! Jesus wept. "Pity," says Max lightly, his hand just hovering around Ruth's shoulders.
"Another time, perhaps."
Nelson watches them go. The beer garden of the Phoenix is filling up with early evening drinkers. He can hear laughter and the clink of glasses. He can't help hoping that Leah's uncle has run out of cider. Chapter 2. Ruth drives slowly along the A47 towards King's Lynn. Although it is past 8, the traffic is never ending. Where can they all be going, thinks Ruth, tapping impatiently on her steering wheel and looking out at the stream of lorries, cars, caravans and people carriers. It's not the holiday season yet, and it's far too late for the school run or even the commuter traffic. What are all these people doing, heading for Narborough, Marham and West Winch? Why are they all trapped on this particular circle of hell? For several junctions now, she has been stuck behind a large BMW with 2 smug riding hats on the back shelf. She starts to hate the BMW family with their long lead sticker and personalised number plate. Shelley, 40, and they're horse riding at weekends. She bets they don't even really like horses. Brought up in a London suburb, Ruth has never been on a horse, though she does have a secret fondness for books about ponies. She bets that Shelley got the car for her 40th birthday, along with a holiday in the Caribbean and a special session of Botox. Ruth will be 40 in 2 months' time. She'd enjoyed the drinks in the pub, though she'd only had orange juice. Max had been very interesting, talking about Roman burial traditions. "We tend to think of the Romans as so civilized," he'd said, "so outraged by the barbaric Iron Age practices. But there is plenty of evidence of Roman punishment burials, ritual killing, and even infanticide. A boy's skull found in St. Albans about 10 years ago, for example, showed that its owner had been battered to death and then decapitated. At Springfield in Kent Foundation, sacrifices of paired babies had been found at all 4 corners of a Roman temple." Ruth shivers and passes a hand lightly across her stomach. But Max had been good company for all his tales of death and decapitation. He'd been brought up in Norfolk and obviously loved the place. Ruth told him about her home on the North Norfolk coast, about the winds that come directly from Siberia, and the marshes flowering purple with sea lavender. "I'd like to visit one day," Max had said. "That would be nice," Ruth had replied, but neither had said more. Ruth had agreed to visit the dig next week, though. Max has a whole team coming up from Sussex. They're going to camp in the fields and dig all through May and June. Ruth feels a rush of nostalgia for summer digs, for the camaraderie, the songs and dope smoking round the campfire, the days of back-breaking labour. She doesn't miss the lack of proper loos or showers, though. She's too old for all that. Thank God, Shelley 40 has turned off to the left, and Ruth can see signs for Snettisham and Hunstanton. She's nearly home. On Radio 4, someone is talking about bereavement. "For everything there is a season." Ruth loves Radio 4, but there are limits. She switches to cassette. Her car is too old for a CD player, and the air is filled with Bruce Springsteen's heartfelt all-American whine. Ruth loves Bruce Springsteen. The open road, the doomed love, the friends called Bobby Joe who've fallen on hard times. And no amount of derision is going to make her change her mind. She turns the sound up. Ruth is now driving between overhanging trees, the verges rich with cow parsley. In a moment, she knows, the trees will vanish as if by magic, and the sea will be in front of her. She never tires of this moment, when the horizon suddenly stretches away into infinity, blue turning to white, turning to gold. She drives faster, and when she reaches the caravan site that marks the start of her road home, she stops and gets out of the car, letting the sea breeze blow back her hair. Ahead of her are the sand dunes, blown into fantastic shapes by the wind. The tide is out and the sea is barely visible, a line of blue against the grey sand. Seagulls call high above, and the red sail of a windsurfer shimmers silently past. Without warning, Ruth leans over and is violently sick. Norwich Castle, a Victorian icing covering a rich medieval cake, is now a museum. Nelson has been there several times with his daughters. They used to love the dungeons, he remembers, and Laura had a soft spot for the teapot collection. He hasn't been for years, though, and as he and his wife Michelle ascend the winding pathway, floodlit and decorated with heraldic banners, he fears the worst. His fears are justified when they are met by serving wenches. The invitation did not mention fancy dress, but these girls are very definitely wenches, wearing low-cut, vaguely medieval dresses and sporting frilly caps on their heads. They are proffering trays of champagne, and Nelson takes the fullest glass, a fact not wasted on Michelle.
"Trust you to take the biggest," she says, accepting a glass of orange juice. "I'm going to need alcohol to get through this evening," says Nelson, as they walk up to the heavy wooden doors. "You didn't tell me it was fancy dress."
"It isn't." Michelle is wearing a silver mini-dress, which is definitely not medieval. In fact, Nelson feels that it could do with a bit more material, a train or a crinoline, or whatever women wore in those days. She looks good, though, he has to admit. They enter a circular reception room to be met by more champagne, someone playing the lute, and, most disturbingly, a jester. Nelson takes a step backwards.
"Go on."
Michelle pushes him from behind.
"There's a man in tights. So, he won't kill you."
Nelson steps warily into the room, keeping his eye on the jester. He has ignored another danger, though, which advances from the opposite direction.
"Ah, Harry, and the beautiful Mrs. Nelson."
It is Whitcliffe, resplendent in a dinner jacket with an open-neck shirt, which he presumably thinks is trendy. He's also wearing a white scarf. Wanker.
"Hello, Jerry."
Whitcliffe is kissing Michelle's hand. The jester is hovering hopefully, shaking his bells.
"You didn't tell me there'd be people dressed up funny,"
says Nelson, his northern accent always evident in times of stress, coming to the fore.
"It's a medieval theme," says Whitcliffe smoothly. "Edward does these things so well."
"Edward?" "Edward Spence," says Whitcliffe.
"You remember I told you that Spence & Co. are sponsoring this evening?"
"The builders, yes." "Building contractors," says a voice behind them. Nelson swings round to see a good-looking man of his own age, wearing faultless evening dress. No white scarf or open-neck shirt for him, just a conventional white shirt and black tie, setting off tan skin and thick, dark hair. Nelson dislikes him instantly.
"Edward!"
Whitcliffe obviously doesn't share this feeling.
"This is Edward Spence, our host. Edward, this is Detective Chief Inspector Harry Nelson and his lovely wife, Michelle."
Edward Spence looks admiringly at Michelle. "I never knew policemen had such beautiful wives, Jerry."
"It's a perk of the job,"
says Nelson tightly. Whitcliffe, who isn't married, a cause of much speculation, says nothing. Michelle, who is used to male admiration, flashes a wide but slightly distancing smile.
"Nelson," Edward Spence is saying, "weren't you the copper involved in the Saltmarsh affair?"
"Yes." Nelson hates talking about his work, and he particularly dislikes being called a copper.
"What a terrible business."
Spence is looking serious.
"Yes." "Well, thank God you solved it."
Spence pats him heartily on the back. Thank Ruth Galloway as well, thinks Nelson. But Ruth has always wanted her involvement in the case kept as low-key as possible.
"Luckily, cases like that don't occur very often,"
he says.
"I'll drink to that."
Spence pushes another glass of champagne into his hand. Nobody has seen Ruth throw up, so she simply kicks some dirt over the vomit and gets back in the car. Bruce Springsteen is telling the improbably named Wendy that they are born to run. Ruth backs the car out of the caravan site and heads for home. Her cottage is one of 3 on the edge of the Saltmarsh. One cottage is empty, and the other is owned by weekenders who visit less and less now that their children are growing up. The isolation does not bother Ruth. In fact, as she gets out of her car and drinks in the wide expanse of marsh, the distant sand dunes, and the far-off murmur of the sea. Her enjoyment is enhanced by the thought that this view is hers, and hers alone. Smiling, she opens her front door. Ruth's ginger cat, Flint, has been lying in wait and now advances, complaining loudly. He has food in his bowl, but it is obviously out of the question that he should eat it. He purrs around Ruth's legs until she gives him a fresh bowlful, heaving slightly at the smell. Then he sniffs it fastidiously and goes out of the cat flap. Ruth sits at the table by the window to check her answer phone messages. One is from her mother asking if Ruth is still coming to stay at the weekend. Her mother always expects Ruth's plans to change at the last minute, despite the fact that Ruth is actually extremely punctual and reliable. The second message is from her friend Shona, burbling on about her married boyfriend Phil. The third is from Max Gray. Interesting. Hi, Ruth. Just to say how much I enjoyed our chat. I was just thinking about our body. If the head is missing, that could be evidence of a head cult. Have you heard of the Lankhills excavations in Winchester? 7 decapitated bodies were found in a Roman cemetery, including a child's. Could that be what we've got here, I wonder? Anyway, speak soon. Ruth thinks how strangely archaeologists speak sometimes. Our body. The bones found buried under the Roman foundations have become our body, linking Ruth and Max in some strange, surreal way. They both feel a sense of ownership, even sympathy towards them. But is this enough reason for Max to leave this message? Did he really just want a cosy chat about decapitated bodies? Or did he, just possibly, want to talk to her again? Ruth sighs. It's all too complicated for her. Besides, she has other things on her mind. Tomorrow, she has to drive to London and tell her mother that she's pregnant. So you see, we're developing 3 key sites in the heart of Norwich. The Old Tannery, the Odeon Cinema, and the derelict house on Woolmarket Street. Woolmarket Street, Whitcliffe cuts in. Didn't that used to be a children's home? I believe so, yes, says Edward Spence, spreading butter on his roll. Are you a local Norwich boy, Jerry? That explains a lot, thinks Nelson, as Whitcliffe nods. Nelson was born in Blackpool, and would be back there like a shot if it wasn't for Michelle and the girls. It had been Michelle's idea for him to take the Norfolk job, and, deep down, he still resents her for it. The girls don't like Blackpool. Everyone talks funnily, and you eat your supper at 5 o'clock. And it's too cold for them, although the local girls seem to wear miniskirts all year round. They are at the banquet stage now. Roast pork disguised as suckling pig. Michelle has left most of hers. She is sparkling away at her neighbour, some goon called Leo wearing a pink shirt and ridiculous glasses. Nelson's neighbour, a regal woman in blue satin, has ignored him completely, which has left him listening to Edward Spen's relentless sales pitch. It's a family company, Spence is saying, built up by my father, Roderick Spence. Actually, it's Sir Roderick. He was knighted for services to the building trade. Dad's supposed to be retired, but he still comes into the office every day. Tries to tell me how to run things. He's against me developing the Woolmarket site, for example, but it's a prime piece of real estate. He laughs expansively. Nelson regards him stonily. Real estate? Who does this guy think he is? Harry! Nelson is aware that his wife is actually speaking to him, twinkling charmingly from across the table. Harry, Leo was talking about the Roman settlement that they've dug up. The one near Swaffham? I was telling him that we've got a friend who's an archaeologist. Michelle and Ruth, rather to Nelson's surprise, hit it off immediately. Michelle likes boasting about her intellectual friend. Honestly, she doesn't care what she looks like. Michelle will be delighted to hear that Ruth hasn't lost any weight.
Yes, says Nelson guardedly. She works at the university.
I'm writing a play, says Leo earnestly, about the Roman god Janus, the two-faced god, the god of beginnings and endings, of doorways and openings, of the past and the future. Janus. Something is echoing in Nelson's head, but is having trouble fighting through the champagne and the suckling pig. Of course, it was Ruth's know-all friend, the one from Sussex University. Janus, god of doors and openings. And suddenly Nelson realizes something else. It is as if he is seeing a film rewound, and, in the second viewing, recognizing something that was there all the time. He sees Ruth walking towards him, her loose shirt blown flat against her body. She hasn't lost weight. In fact, she may even have put some on. Could Ruth possibly be pregnant? Because, if so, he could be the father. Chapter 3. What do you mean you're pregnant? You're not even married. This is one of the times when Ruth just wants to lift up her head and howl. She has made her disclosure on a Sunday afternoon walk in Castle Wood, hoping that the open-air setting might dissuade her mother from having hysterics. Fat chance. You don't need to be married to have a baby, she says. Her mother draws herself up to her full height. Like Ruth, she is a big woman, but majestic rather than fat. She looks like Queen Victoria in M&S slacks. I am aware of that, Ruth. What I mean, as you know very well, is that God has ordained marriage for the purpose of having children. Well, she might have guessed that God would come into it somewhere. Ruth's parents are both born-again Christians, who believe that unless Ruth too is born again, she faces a one-way trip to eternal damnation. A location that, at present, seems preferable to Eltham. Well, I'm not married, says Ruth steadily. But the father is, she adds silently. She knows this piece of information will not help matters at all. Who's the father? Asks her father, rather hoarsely. Ruth looks at him sadly. She usually finds her dad a bit easier than her mother, but he seems about to work himself up into Victorian father frenzy. I'd rather not say. You'd rather not say? Ruth's mother collapses onto a tree stump. Oh, Ruth! How could you? She starts to sob, noisily, into a tiny lace handkerchief. Other Sunday walkers look at her curiously as they tramp past. Ruth kneels beside her mother, feeling, despite herself, extremely guilty. Mum, look, I'm sorry if this has upset you, but please try to look at the positive side. You'll be getting a grandchild. I'll be having a baby. Isn't that something to be happy about? Happy about having a bastard grandchild? Rumbles her father. Oh, are you out of your mind? Obviously, thinks Ruth. She must have been out of her mind to assume, for 1 second, that her parents would be happy at the news, that they would rejoice with her, that they would accept that, while their daughter doesn't have a partner, she does have a baby, and that the baby is, if not planned, desperately wanted. How desperately, Ruth does not like to admit even to herself. All she knows is the moment when her suspicions crystallized into that thin blue line on her pregnancy kit. Her heart went into overdrive. It was as if every heartbreak and disappointment in her life, to say nothing of the traumas of the past few months, had faded into nothingness, leaving only a boundless blue contentment. I hope you'll change your minds. is all she says. She stands and helps her mother up from the tree stump.
We never change our minds about anything, says her mother proudly. That's not the sort of people we are.
You can say that again, thinks Ruth. Being born again has only increased her parents' already well-developed sense of infallibility. After all, if God has chosen you, how can you ever be wrong again? About anything. Her parents found God when she was a teenager. Far too late for Ruth, although she had, for a time, accompanied them to services. She has never found God, but then again, she isn't about to go looking. Her father gestures dramatically towards Sevendrug Castle in the background.
Our values don't change. They haven't changed since that castle was built in the Middle Ages.
Ruth does not add that the castle is, in fact, an 18th century folly, or that the Middle Ages were presumably rife with illegitimate babies and unmarried mothers. She only says, well, I hope you'll feel differently when the baby's born. Neither of her parents answers, but when they cross Avery Hill Road, Ruth's father takes her arm in a protective way, as if being pregnant has seriously impaired her traffic sense. This Ruth finds obscurely comforting. Sunday afternoon in a King's Lynn suburb. Cars are being washed, fresh-faced families set out on bike rides, dogs are walked, newspapers are read, and the smell of Sunday lunch permeates the air. After his own lunch, roast lamb with vegetarian option for Laura, Nelson announces his intention of mowing the lawn. Michelle says she'll go to the gym. She's the only woman in the world who wants to go to the gym on a Sunday afternoon. And Laura says she'll go too, for a swim. That leaves Nelson and 16-year-old Rebecca, who immediately disappears upstairs to plug herself into her iPod and computer. This suits Nelson fine. He wants to be by himself, performing some mundane domestic task. It's the way he thinks best. By the time he has got out the lawnmower, found that it has run out of petrol, fetched the spare can from the boot of his Mercedes, dropped the garage door on his foot, fixed the broken clutch cable, and moved Michelle's washing line, he's thinking furiously. Is Ruth pregnant? Is it his baby? They spent one night together back in February, but at the same time he knew Ruth was seeing her ex-boyfriend Peter. It's possible then that the baby is Peter's. And what about Eric, Ruth's old tutor? He always thought Ruth was very close to Eric. Could they have been sleeping together? It's a funny thing, but he thinks of Ruth as somehow existing on a higher plane than most people. The night they slept together had seemed removed from the ordinary motivations of lust and desire, though those had played their part. He and Ruth had come together as equals, who had just been through a terrible experience together. It had just seemed right. The sex, Nelson remembers, had been incredible. Somehow, remembering that sense of rightness, Nelson feels convinced that Ruth did conceive that night. It seems almost preordained. Jesus. He gives the mower a vicious shove. He's thinking like some crap women's magazine. It's highly unlikely that she got pregnant. She was probably using birth control, which was never mentioned. They didn't talk much. He's not even sure that she is pregnant. She's probably just put on weight.
Dad!
Rebecca is leaning out of an upstairs window. With her long blonde hair and serious face, she looks oddly accusatory, like a Victorian picture of a wronged woman. For one stupid moment, Nelson imagines that his daughter knows all about Ruth, is about to tell Michelle.
Dad, is Doug on the phone? He says, do you want to go to the pub tonight?
Nelson pauses, breathing hard. The smell of mown grass is almost overpowering.
Thanks, love. Tell him no. I'd rather spend the night in with my family. Rebecca shrugs.
Suit yourself. But I think Mum's going out to the pictures.